Alright, so let's talk about Majora's Mask. This game is different. It's weird, creepy, and it kind of gets in your head. Majora's Mask isn't just another adventure for Link, it's like existential, and the whole game feels off. In a way, that's kind of why it sticks with you even after you're done playing. But why is that? Let's dive into what this game does to our brains, from the psychology to the actual science of fear, empathy, and everything that makes it so disturbing. Fear, the brain's natural response. So let's start with the biggest thing you notice in Majora's Mask. That huge moon hanging in the sky, looking like it's ready to crush everything. Just seeing that is enough to make you a little anxious, right? Turns out, that's not just in your head. When we're faced with something scary, the thought of the world ending, the part of our brain called the amygdala kicks in. That is the part responsible for fear, and it starts firing up, telling our bodies to get ready to fight or flight. Basically, freak out or run away. This game uses this to keep us constantly on edge. There's this countdown timer, the eerie music, and the visuals, all triggering stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Our heart rate might actually speed up, even though we're just sitting there, because our brains can't really tell it's just a game. It's the same reaction we'd have if there were a real threat nearby. It's kind of wild when you think about it. A game can trick your brain into thinking you're actually in danger. Dopamine, reward for progress. But the game isn't all about anxiety. It's actually really rewarding too, and that's where dopamine comes in. Dopamine is basically our brain's reward system. It's the feel-good chemical that gets released whenever we accomplish something, like finishing a quest or getting a new mask. Each time we get one of those little victories, our brain hits us with dopamine, making us want to keep going. In Majora's Mask, those rewards are balanced with all the creepy, intense moments. It's like a roller coaster. The fear keeps us engaged, and the rewards keep us motivated to push through. So even though the game is stressful, it's also addictive. We want to keep going, even though it's kind of messing with us. Empathy and connection with NPCs. One of the weirdest parts about Majora's Mask is how you actually feel for the people in the game. They're all going through different kinds of struggles, and each one is facing some kind of fear or loss. There's this theory in psychology about mirror neurons. It's basically how we can feel what other people feel, even in real life. So when Link is talking to someone who's scared or sad, we actually feel a bit of their emotion too. This game kind of forces us to care. Like there's this lady who's waiting for her fiance to show up, and she's super stressed. Or there's a little girl in Ikana Valley who's taking care of her cursed dad. Helping these people isn't just about finishing the game. It actually makes us feel like we're helping, which keeps us emotionally invested. The more empathy we feel, the more attached we get to Terminal and its people. And that makes the stakes feel even higher. Isolation and existential dread. Then there's something that really gets to us on a deeper level. Isolation. Unlike in other Zelda games, Link is in a world he's not from, surrounded by people who don't fully recognize him. It creates this strong sense of loneliness and even existential dread. Link is an outsider trying to help people who might not remember him once time resets. It's this haunting reminder that his actions might not have a lasting impact. A fear that taps into something a lot of us feel, especially in unfamiliar places. Like the game is saying, you're here, but do you really matter? The feeling of isolation and insignificance is woven into the experience, giving us chills, not just because of the setting, but because it hits close to home. Mortality salience, facing the end. Here's where it gets super deep. Majora's Mask makes us think about death, and not in a subtle way either. That's called mortality salience. It's basically the awareness of death and the fact that everything is kind of temporary. In the game, the moon is a constant reminder that the world could end at any second. And in real life, this thought can bring out all kinds of feelings. Like, people actually get more emotional and reflective when they're reminded of how short life is. In Majora's Mask, this looming deadline makes us care more about our choices, like what quests to do or who to help. It's wild how a game can make us think of something so real. Stage 1. Denial. Clocktown is a perfect representation of denial. Despite the moon looming large and dangerously close, the people in town act like nothing is wrong. Some dismiss it as a rumor or a bad omen, but no one fully acknowledges the reality of the situation that they may not survive in 3 days' time. In grief is our brain's way of protecting us from the shock of loss. The prefrontal cortex, which handles rational thought, can temporarily shut down, suppress the full impact of emotional trauma, letting us cope little by little. Clocktown is like that. It's a bustling, normal place filled with people who are almost willfully ignoring the danger they're in. This reflects how in real life, denial can make us avoid or deny the gravity of loss. Stage 2. Anger. The next stage we encounter is anger. symbolized by both Skull Kid and Woodfall region. Skull Kid, who wields Majora's Mask, is a character consumed by anger and resentment. He is lashing out at the world because he feels isolated and hurt. In Woodfall, we meet the King Deku, who is furious over his daughter's disappearance and immediately blames the monkey for it without looking for any other answers. Anger is a common part of grief. When the brain processes loss, the amygdala, the part responsible for emotional intensity, can become highly activated, leading to feelings of rage, frustration, or blame. Skull Kid's chaotic behavior and the Deku King's misplaced rage are like a reflection of how people try to cope with pain by directing it outward. In Woodfall, this anger creates suffering for everyone around them, just as it can be in real life. Stage 3. Bargaining. Snowhead introduces us to bargaining, a stage where people feel they could make things right, if only they could go back or change something. Link meets Darmani's ghost, who is desperate for a second chance. Darmani died trying to save his people, and he's stuck in a state of regret, feeling like he could have done more. When Link uses the Goron mask to embody Darmani, he helps bring peace to the people, but also allows Darmani to move forward. Bargaining often involves the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in decision making and contemplating what-if scenarios. In grief, people might think, if I had only done this, or I wish I could go back. Snowhead shows us how bargaining keeps Darmani's spirit tied to the world, unable to accept what's happened, just as people in grief can feel stuck, replaying moments, hoping they could have been different. Stage 4. Depression. In the Great Bay, the Zora singer Lulu is grieving over the loss of her eggs. She's so overcome with sadness that she can't speak or sing anymore. She isolates herself from others, just staring out at the sea. Her grief is a heavy, quiet presence, and it affects everyone around her. It's a representation of depression, where grief feels inescapable and everything seems so colorless. When someone reaches the stage of grief, the brain's dopamine levels can plummet. We can get hard to find pleasure or motivation in anything. The prefrontal cortex becomes less active, while the areas associated with sadness, like the thalamus, can become highly engaged, leading to feelings of hopelessness or withdrawal. In Lulu's case, it's like her whole world has stopped. We feel this way when we visit the Great Bay, as if her sadness has spread to the entire area. It's a haunting portrayal of how isolating and consuming depression can feel. Stage 5. Acceptance. Finally, we reach Ikana Valley, which is a representation of acceptance. Ikana is a land filled with spirits who are stuck between life and death. By helping them out, Link helps these spirits find peace. The Composer brothers and other ghosts come to terms with their deaths and find rest, showing that even though loss is painful, there can be a sense of peace in accepting what's ahead. Acceptance doesn't mean forgetting or moving on in the traditional sense, so making peace with loss and understanding that it's a part of life. Ikana Valley is like a mirror of this process. It's where characters can finally find closure, and Link himself comes to terms with the endless cycles of repetition, embracing the knowledge that he's helped others to find peace. Children of the Moon, just a memory. The masked kids on the moon in Majora's Mask symbolize bottled up feelings, memories, and experiences that shape us, but remain unresolved. Each child wears a mask from a defeated boss, representing remnants of trauma or parts of ourselves that we hide away. They bring back childhood memories and little bits of the past that stick with us, shaping who we become. By talking to these kids, Link confronts these memories, facing the hidden parts of himself. The moon becomes a metaphor for the mind, a place for both serenity and haunting truths. Majora's Mask, in itself, embodies chaos, fear, and the darkest thoughts. Defeating it isn't just about victory, it's about release, making peace with inner turmoil and emerging stronger than ever. Catharsis, the big battle. Finally, there's this big showdown with you and Majora at the end. By the time you get there, you're carrying all this emotional weight from the whole game, the stress, the empathy for everyone you've met, and the pressure of that countdown clock. All of this build-up releases in this one big moment. In psychology, this is called catharsis, the release of pent-up emotions. Beating Majora isn't just about finishing the game, it's like letting go of everything that's been building up throughout the whole story. You get this rush of dopamine, that feeling of yes, I did it. It's satisfying, and it's also kind of relieving. In a way, it's almost like taking a deep breath after a crazy experience. So yeah, Majora's Mask isn't just some Zelda game with a darker story, it's a whole experience that taps into our brains and emotions in a way that makes it feel real. It uses fear, empathy, and it even makes us think about our own lives and the time we have. That's what makes it so memorable and why people are still talking about it. I hope you guys enjoyed the psychoanalysis of Majora's Mask. It was really fun to make, and I'm glad I was able to make a video that really touches not just my heart, but the heart of all Zelda fans.